Good morning. Hi, Tvisha. We met briefly. Hi, everyone. It's very exciting for me to be sitting here looking at all the kids in their school uniforms. Are you bunking school? Is this official? What is happening? It's official. You all are very lucky because we used to wait for these occasions where we were asked to, go somewhere else and do other things than sit in class. So, welcome and welcome, Tvisha. Um, we had a brief chat, so I'm not going to pretend like we haven't met. We've met. I read your book yesterday because I wanted it to be fresh for today. And let's start off with something that perhaps connects the both of us. I wrote a book 5 years ago, and the question I got most, and I still have been receiving, is whether everything I wrote in this novel was about me. you know? So how do you, and I think, it sounds like a very surface level question, but I think every author who puts herself or himself or themselves into a book needs to figure which part of it is fiction, which part of it is not, which is autobiographical, what is the blurring of the boundaries. So can we speak a little bit about that in your case?
I would say that my book is not purely fictitious, neither is it purely an autobiography. There are definitely parts of my real life that have been included into the book, but a lot of hilarious incidents that have been written into the book are fictitious. So I would say that I tried to put a fictitious or a fictional spin to my real life.
And speaking about the fictional and the fictitious spin, for those of you who have not read the book yet, the book is here. It's called Stirring Mocktales, Mocktales, which is Tales. And one of the things I loved about the book is the structure, which sort of jumps at you. It's 27 chapters in all. The opening, or the majority of the book, which is 26 chapters, they borrow from the letters of the alphabet, right? So it's A to Z, and each title begins with a letter of the alphabet. So it's A and B and C and D. How did you hit upon the structure? Because as authors, at every age, whether you're young, whether you're middle-aged, you are thinking of how to structure your book. So how did it come about in your case?
It was definitely not a snap decision that the book structure would be the way it is now. While I was writing this book, I came across another book by Miss Twinkle Khanna, which is Mrs. Funnybones. It's hilarious, and I tried to mirror parts of my book to hers, and she had a similar structure to it. Also, I hadn't intended for this book to be a book. It started out with a couple of funny short stories, and I titled them in a way that I found sort of catchy, which is why I tried to add a uniformity in all of the chapters. That's how the structure came.
I think it was very effective and efficient because it just sort of gallops. I started reading it yesterday and I felt I couldn't stop. I have another book in my bag right now. It happened to win the Booker Award day before yesterday. But I finished your book and then I started reading that. They're very different. But I think in the end, if you ask publishers, if you ask readers, if you ask authors or judges, to give their definition of what makes a book good, right? Why would you want to print a book? Or why would you want to give it a prize? I think unanimously people will say a book that you can't put down. And that's such a kind of, it sounds very vague, but it kind of encompasses all genres, all styles, all ethnicities, its languages. If you can't put a book down, even in my book, that's a good book. Do you agree? And when you're reading a book, what makes a good book for you, or what makes something a good book for you?
I would definitely agree. A good book is definitely one that you cannot put down. It's also one that brings you not only joy but also makes you feel an emotion or feel something that you may not have felt before, makes you think a little bit differently. That is definitely going to be my definition of a good book, and I'm honored that you described mine as a good book.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If I finish a book and I finish it, hungrily, when you're devouring a book, what better? What better compliment than that for an author? Now, getting specifically to your book, it's sort of the premise or the setup is a teenager as you were. I think you began writing when you were 12 and you finished when you were 13 and now you're 14, correct? Okay, so that's the timeline, the evolutionary timeline, which is quite short. But again, speaking as someone, I think I would be described very sadly as an elder millennial. Nobody likes the categories they are ascribed. So I think at 43, I would be an elder millennial. At 14, are you Gen Z or something after that? Have they gone back to A? What is it?
I'm confused myself.
There must be some name. Sorry, this is a digression, but is there a name? Is there a category that you guys like to sort of use for yourselves?
I don't think we like to use it, or maybe we do. I'm not very sure, but I think we're termed Gen Z right now.
So you're still Gen Z. Okay,
Yes.
okay, fine. That makes a lot of us feel less ancient. But moving on, so you sort of located the book physically in one or two places, which is your school and your home. And I actually made notes while reading your book, as a good elder millennial would. What is a Discord server, Tvisha?
Okay, I don't think it's that much in trend right now,
Yeah.
but Discord is like a social media platform where we all have usernames, and on the Discord server, our entire grade would chat about whatever is going on or whatever should be going on. And that server, honestly, it caused a lot of chaos in each and every one of our lives, which is a main reason why it's in the book.
So it's basically a social media platform, but within your school system. Or is it, or are many schools connected?
No, it's not official as such. It's just a social media platform. You don't need to have a particular. I don't know if there's an age limit, but it's not supposed that everyone has to be on this and it's representing a school or by the school. It's just to connect, like WhatsApp or Instagram.
So the book opens with a kind of a controversial situation that erupts thanks to this Discord server, where something not so nice is said about you. Or when I say you, I mean the persona in the book, because even if you're writing, as we were discussing a little while ago over coffee, that even if you're writing a book that you say is an autobiography or a biographical, it's never really you, right? It's the opposite of what the reader expects. The reader feels even when you're writing fiction, it's you, which could happen. But very often, even when you set out to write about yourself, and I want to ask you about that also, it doesn't come out exactly as we see ourselves or our friends see ourselves or our family sees us. So my first part one of my question is, these we live in an era where social media dominates, that goes without saying. And people are very hurtful on social media, They say things behind the cover of this digital wall. They feel that, anything can be said and you have impunity. Does that affect Gen Z, and you are the younger Gen Z, as much as it affects all of us? I mean, we call it trolls. I think trolls is the term still used overall. Is it something that bothers you and your friends? Certainly it does in the book.
It did in the moment, definitely, when someone says something bad about you or terrible about you, which you believe that may be true or untrue. It will definitely hurt receiving criticism that isn't constructive, and it hurts to a different level on the basis of obviously who is saying it and what they're saying. But I believe that I have learned to overcome it to a certain extent. A lot of people, they obviously feel that pain on different degrees, but no matter how much you deny it, it will still affect you.
Right. And do you find a lot of people leaving these platforms for this reason, or one is so addicted that you still stay despite what is being said?
I feel as though I don't believe that anyone would leave a platform because of this. They would stay because if they leave, there could be two reasons.
FOMO.
FOMO, yeah, that would be one reason. And another would be maybe they would be perceived as someone who cares too much. Obviously, no one wants to show that they are hurt to anyone else. And if they leave, it is quite evident that they have been affected.
You made a reference in an early chapter to the TV show Friends, which is universally sort of adored and quoted and binge watched. That's true of you and your friends as well?
I wouldn't say friends. I would say it's more of an addiction that me and my mother we share. We just love bonding over the TV show because it's very real.
Oh, very real, you say. How nice. That would not be a word. I love Friends. I'm one of those people who can quote whole episodes, I think, but real would perhaps not be the first word. You've quoted Phoebe somewhere. Is she your favorite character?
Actually, no. My favorite character is Chandler.
This is mine as well. Hmm. Moving on, lest we say things that are very sad. You speak about 12 year, you were 12 when you wrote this, and you speak about diets. And what does that mean? Because I cannot imagine a 12-year-old being on a diet. What does that mean?
Unfortunately, I was on a diet when I was 12. Wasn't one of those doctor prescribed ones. It was more of a when you play sport at definitely a serious level, you have to put in a lot of dedication, a lot of hard work. And that not only includes discipline in the sense that you have to exercise a lot, you have to wake up early, also includes you have to be very healthy. And being healthy includes not only exercise but also what you put into your body. So my diet wasn't one of the diets you see and a dietitian prescribes to you. It was more of less junk food, less processed food.
Oddly, and I only discovered this when I read about you in the back flap and your introduction. You used to be a tennis player. You represented your state. You were playing national. What is it?
It the system that we play in is not a representing anything system. It's called ITA. It's All India Tennis Association, where you kind of represent yourself, even though your state or the state you're playing in is definitely mentioned. On the basis of how much and how well you play, you get a ranking. So that's how it's All India, the ranking.
Oddly, there's no mention of tennis in your book, or did I miss it?
I do believe there's very little mention of tennis. It's
Tell
bec-
me about that.
This is because when I wrote the book, I had just left playing tennis. And obviously, when you're a part of something or something is a part of your life for very long and you leave it, you feel this sense of emptiness. And I wasn't really able to confront it because early stages. And so I tried to erase the fact that it happened for the book.
Is that something that, as a writer of fiction, you find to be one of the merits or one of the pleasures or one of the privileges of a writer? That you can live an alternative life, right? You can live all these many lives attributed to your characters. Is that something that you find to be its appeal?
That's definitely one of the that's definitely my favorite aspect of writing, that you can change reality in your world and you can tweak what you like, what you don't like. So yeah, definitely.
I mean, it sounds so obvious, right? Because writers are supposed to be creators of worlds and, you can invent reality. But while you're writing it, you realize what great vicarious pleasures are to be had, right? And to be a little Freudian about it, these are all unforbidden pleasures, right? There's nothing forbidden about it when you write about it. You can live any kind of life. You can be a criminal, you can be an angel, you can be whatever the hell you want. And I think that's a very attractive part of being a writer. Let's see. Okay, now somewhere in the book, I think this is the chapter Dancing Diva. You talk about Mr. Darcy. So clearly you were reading, or the characters reading Pride and Prejudice. Is that realistic? Were you reading, or was the character reading Pride and Prejudice?
I was genuinely reading Pride and Prejudice at the time of the incident. And at that time, you mentioned at the beginning of our conversation that a good book is one you cannot put down. That is something I strongly feel for Pride and Prejudice because, according to me, of course, every book has its positive aspects, its negative aspects, but that book was unbelievable. The emotional levels that it reached was simply beautiful.
I'm so glad to hear that because I think we were prescribed Pride and Prejudice in college. I went to college not very far from here, and I think I would have been in my perhaps around 20 or 19 years old. And it was such a, it's one of those annoying things, and you talk about this in your book as well. It was such a gender divide. The women in class, and most of the women most of the students in English literature class were women. um loved Jane Austen, and the boys would be, talking about J.R.R. Tolkien and Lord of the Rings and science fiction. And now many years later, you realize these are not mutually exclusive categories. One can be a fan of fantasy and science fiction, and one can love Jane Austen, and that's all fine, But when you're much younger, sometimes you feel the need to define yourself by what you dislike, also, right? So I remember the boys saying, "Oh God, Jane Austen is so boring," and it would make me it would make me angry then, but now I kind of laugh about it because a majority of your OTT so-called content and films borrow from Jane Austenian plots and plot lines, and all genders are watching and enjoying it, right? So those distinctions fade away, hopefully.
I personally have the entire set of Lord of the Rings in my collection of books, and I enjoyed it, definitely. And I would still favor Jane Austen more, but I believe you don't really need a gender to like something.
And I actually, this is again a digression. For the first time, I watched the Lord of the Rings films, which came out some 20 or whatever years ago. And I realized I'm not someone who reads a lot for the plot. I read for the character, for the dialogue, for so many other things. This happened, that happened is just one way of reading a book. But what I loved about Lord of the Rings in the films was the language, the way the characters spoke, not necessarily the battles they went into or the kind of Game of Thrones thing, right? The spectacle. I mean, that's fine, that's good, and I can see it has an audience. But the way they spoke to me was what made it, and I think, yeah, that's again genre agnostic, good writing. Now, I have a could be annoying question to you. Who are Hailey Bieber and Selena Gomez?
Very unfortunate. My generation, maybe not just my generation, very addicted to social media and the gossip that it gives you. And at that moment, I remember very vividly that I was speaking to my friend, and she was very excited because she read this article about this gossip that Hailey Bieber, I'm not very sure, she's a model.
Is she related to Justin Bieber?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
How so?
I think they're married.
Okay, okay.
And Selena Gomez, she's a singer, actress. So she was telling me that there was a drama, and I found it amusing, and I decided to put it into my book.
Nice. No, I was just trying to educate myself. Now, there's a line in one of your chapters which I actually liked, and I thought it kind of went beyond what one would expect of a teenager to write. And so I wrote it down. I think this was in your chapter called Enigma of Equality. And you say somewhere, the unwritten truth thrives. What do you mean, and why did you write that? What is the unwritten truth? I found that phrase to be quite wise. What is an unwritten truth?
I believe, or when I wrote that chapter, I believed that an unwritten truth is a truth that no one says out loud. It's a truth that you just feel it. It's not said, it's not spoken about. It just exists in the air. And I believe that the truth that you don't need to write down or speak about is most true or has most power.
I think that's very beautiful because beyond all the things that we are talking about lies this question of truth, right? And I think very often fiction arrives at truth. Fiction is not fact, but fiction, good fiction, tries to grope at and arrive at the truth, right? And you know, again, of the many debates and distinctions that people make in the literary community and the journalistic community, is this fiction and non-fiction thing. And I feel so often truth is grasped by fiction in a far more compelling way, very often a far more beautiful way. Having said that, now we have something called non-fiction writing that borrows from the novelistic genre, right? You're reading non-fiction, but it's not prosaic, it's not dull, it's not kind of just bullet points. So again, we're talking about a blurring of boundaries, but that unwritten truth to me really stood out. I think that phrase stayed or sort of echoed in my mind.
Thank you.
Let's see what we have next. Sorry, I'm squinting at my post-its. Yeah. So now, I don't know if you, how many people in the audience here, and including you, and you can raise your hand if you haven't answered the question. How many people have watched Inside Out 2? There are a few people. Yeah, you watched it? Yeah. Okay. So, and now I think it's on some OTT platform, Netflix or some such. I was mind blown by that movie. I loved Inside Out 1, but I found that Inside Out 2 addressed so many psychological, psychoanalytical issues in, in such a wonderful animated adventure style, right? Now, my question to you is, they introduced a character in part 2, which was embarrassment, uh, and anxiety, and ennui, all of whom I loved. Tell me something about that, because while reading your book, it also put me in mind of Inside Out too, especially in terms of the embarrassment that is so much a part and parcel of teenage years.
It's a very insightful question. I might take a little time to process it. I would say that Inside Out the movie, the second part at least, it included what a teenager felt, and that's how it's very similar to my book, because my book spoke a little less about the incident and a little more about the emotion after or felt behind of the incident. And Inside Out, they showed the emotions in a very personified form, which is what made them a little more um, opaque. And that's why I would say embarrassment is definitely a part of teenage years, but I would say it's there throughout life from whatever I've seen. Obviously, I haven't seen much of life, but embarrassment, you feel it on a day to day basis, on a small thing or a big thing. Embarrassment is, in a way, beautiful because it's the way you feel about something that you might not be totally comfortable around or with. And the other characters, ennui and anxiety. Anxiety is Anxiety is the very personification of me. I get very paranoid over the smallest of things, and it's okay to be like that. It just shows how much you care. So anxiety really cared about Riley. I feel whoever's watched the movie would understand this better. Sorry. Anxiety really cared about the character, but they happened to mess up a little bit. But if you see, there's all the emotions there in the control system. And if only joy was leading the way, or only sadness was leading the way, or only ennui was leading the way, Riley would malfunction. You need all of the emotions to drive you. Otherwise, you will not be able to be stable or function in the way that you should.
No, that's a good, exhaustive answer. Clearly, you connected with the film just as much as I did. And I think just to carry on a little bit about your point about embarrassment, it never leaves you. And I feel as I'm growing older, I'm trying to minimize the big role that embarrassment play. And they also had a physically large embodiment or personification in the movie. And I think because it plays an outsized role in our lives, embarrassment actually should be a smaller emotion. We're never going to be over it. But I feel now, again, I think that's one of the privileges of growing older. You are not so afraid of looking ridiculous, and if you do, you're able to just move on because in the end, nobody really cares as much as you do. Now, I think I am getting the signal to wind up our conversation. And should we be opening it up to the audience? Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rehana and Tvisha. That was a really insightful and perceptive conversation, I think. But we do have some time for some Q&A. So we're going to open it up to the audience. And if you have any questions bubbling inside of you for either of the speakers, feel free to raise your hand and someone from our team will bring a mic to you. And yeah, that's how we're going to do the Q&A. So any of us that have any questions for Rehana or Tvisha? Yeah, okay. So we'll just wait for the mic to reach you.
So, hello, I'm from Shikha, and I wanted to ask you that I haven't read the book, but I want to know what's in the book and what you have written in the book. So, about what?
I would say that the book is not about something spectacular. It's just on a day-to-day basis you go through something or the other, some incident that makes your heart beat a little bit faster. That's what I would say the book is about.
Thank you.
So, what did you think about writing this book? Like, how did you think about writing this book?
If I'm going to be very honest with you, writing this book was not completely my idea. It started out with one or two chapters that weren't meant to be chapters. They were just going to sit somewhere in the computer. But someone I know told me that they were good and I should write a little more like that. And on those lines, I wrote and wrote and wrote until it seemed complete.
Which book is your favorite book and why?
It's really difficult to pick just one. I read a lot. I would say there's this book by Emily Bronte. It's Wuthering Heights. And why, as to why, I think it's because that book was a roller coaster of emotions and it showed how love or two people having a connection, even if that connection is very strong, it's very good, it could be deteriorating to that person.
Sorry, I just want to add a thing. I wish your English teacher was sitting here in the audience. She'd be very proud of you. Gothic romance from the 1900s. Excellent.
Hi, my name is Vasantika. I just wanted to ask, how did you feel like when writing the book? Like, what were your emotions?
Okay, I'm really sorry. Can you please repeat your name?
My name is Vasantika.
It's a really nice name.
Thank you.
How I felt while writing the book.
Yes.
Honestly, it's a very deep question. I'm not sure myself. I was just writing what came to my mind. And when I was done writing, the weight of whatever things must be going on in a person that sort of was taken off of my shoulders. So it was like an escape or a release of energy.
Thank you.
We have time for just one more question. So just being mindful of time.
Hi, like I want to ask that was there someone to inspire you to write the book or?
I would definitely say there were a lot of people inspiring me. One of those people is in the audience right now, my grandmother over here. She's a far better writer than I am, and she's definitely inspired me to write more.
Thanks.
Do we have time for one more? There's
Okay,
a girl.
one more. There's someone in the front.
In front.
Yeah.
Can you just hand her the mic, please? Yeah. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Sanj. Who guided you to write this book?
First, your name is lovely. And who guided me? I'm not very sure. When I was writing this book, I was kind of all alone. My mother would go to work every day, and I had plenty of free time. And my mom said no watching TV. So this was sort of the way to pass time. And it wasn't meant to be a book, like I've said before. So I wouldn't say there was a guiding figure as such. But once the book was done, I was very confused as to what to do with it. And definitely a few guiding figures were my grandmother, right here, and my mother. She was very supportive. And there were a few people I met. My publisher, Miss Moshmi Sachdeva, she was amazing too.
Thank you.